So, can a computer actually compose music? It feels like a super modern question, right? But composers have been wrestling with this for ages, and we're going to dive in because the answer is way more interesting than just a yes or no. Okay, so the short answer is yeah, it can. But honestly, that's not the interesting part. The real question is how. You see, not all computer music is the same thing at all. We're going to look at two totally different ways to get there, and what you need to remember is this. It's all about the method, not necessarily what you hear at the end. All right, first up, let's picture the composer as an architect. This is the classic way of doing things, what we call algorithmic composition. Here, the composer isn't just, writing notes. Nope. They're designing the entire blueprint, the whole system that's going to build the music from the ground up. So yeah, that's algorithmic composition. And the key thing to get here is that every single rule, every little procedure is laid out by a human from the very start. It's kind of like giving a robot a super detailed recipe, right? But you're not just giving it the recipe, you're also teaching it the fundamental laws of physics and chemistry for cooking before it even touches an egg. The composer's brain is literally coded into the machine. And this architect has a pretty wild toolkit. I mean, you've got things like stochastic processes. That's a fancy term for music built on controlled probability, a big deal for composers like Yannis Xenakis. Then there are Markov chains, where the next note is basically decided by a coin flip based on the note you're on right now. You can even use genetic algorithms to evolve musical ideas. But in every single one of these, it's the composer who's writing the code, defining the very DNA of the music. This matrix you're looking at, it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. This is for a Markov chain. See how the composer has to manually decide the probability for every move? Like, if we're on event 2, they've literally written in the code, there's a 50% chance we stay here and a 50% chance we jump to event 1. It's not random. It's controlled probability. It's a system built on pure human logic, from top to bottom. Okay, but that's just one side of the coin. There's a totally different approach. So let's switch metaphors. Now imagine the composer isn't an architect, but a teacher with a very, very smart apprentice. This is the world of modern AI music, and it's way less about building a blueprint and much more about guiding a student. So how does this AI apprentice actually learn? Well, it's basically a 3-step deal. First, the input. You just feed it a ton of music. I mean, a massive database, like, say, every piano sonata ever written. Then the learning part. The AI, which is usually a neural network, just listens. It churns through all that music and starts to figure out the patterns, the style, the harmony, all by itself. No one tells it the rules of music theory. It deduces them from the data. And finally, generate. Based on everything it's learned, it starts creating brand new music that sounds just like the stuff it studied. And that right there, that brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. The real difference between our architect and our apprentice, it isn't always something you can hear in the final piece. The difference, the big difference, is in the process. We're talking about two completely different roads to the same destination. Let's put them side by side. The architect, that's a top-down approach. The composer designs the rules from scratch. The apprentice, that's a bottom-up. The system learns the rules from what you give it. The architect's logic is all about explicit math and rules. The apprentice's logic, it's all statistical patterns. And this totally changes the job of the human. Are you a system designer defining how the music gets made? Or are you a curator and a trainer, just providing the what for it to learn from? So where does all this leave us? Well, it leads to a much, much bigger question, one that really makes you think about what it even means to be an artist today. When a machine is this deeply involved, who, or maybe what, is the real composer? Let me put it another way. The architect's tool is like a paintbrush, sure, but it's an unbelievably complex one that the artist had to build from the ground up, designed to paint only in a very specific, rule-based way. The apprentice's tool, the AI, that's more like having an assistant who has memorized every painting in the Louvre and can now paint you a new piece in the style of any master you choose. The artist's relationship with the art itself, it's just fundamentally different. So I have to ask you, what do you think? When the creative process gets shared like this between a human and a machine, who really gets to call the final piece their own? The person who designed the system, the one who picked out all the training data? Or, hey, maybe the machine gets a little bit of the credit too? At the end of the day, as these two worlds, the architect and the apprentice, start to blend together, maybe we're just asking the wrong question altogether. Maybe the important thing isn't who wrote the music anymore.
maybe the much more exciting question, the one that really matters for the future, is how did this music come to be?